Welcome. In this video, we have with us Mike, co-founder of Pyth, one of the leading Oracle solutions in DeFi. Today, we're going to talk about his journey to DeFi, what Pyth is, what differentiates it from other Oracles, and some of the awesome applications that are being built with it. Welcome to the show, Mike.
Thanks so much for having me on. Excited to be here.
Yeah, well, we're excited to have you. So to start, why don't you give us a little bit of background about yourself?
Cool. So I come from a traditional finance background. I worked at Morgan Stanley out of college, FX trading, and then I started getting into systematic trading. I went to a quant fund called KCG, where I was doing FX trading there. I'm kind of running the BD side. And then that was purchased by Virtu. And I went to an exchange, Cboe Global Markets, to help run their Cboe FX product. And then I went to Jump during the kind of nascency of the Jump crypto kind of story. So it was 2019. There was about 25 of us on the crypto team. It was led by the founder. I was there until sort of the founding of Pyth, and spun out, started Doura Labs, and have been focused on building Pyth ever since.
Cool. And just what year was that you spun out Pyth?
So we basically spun out in 2023.
2023. Okay, so kind of
Yeah,
the
officially.
deepest part of the bear market.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, there's a kind of a funny backstory about when we spun out, and it was during the collapse of FTX. We had an offsite here in Porto, and where I'm based, and there are other entities that were contributing to Pyth. So there's a bunch of different publishers, and then there's a foundation, like as is pretty standard. And I was still at Jump, but during this time, we had all the people who were in the foundation, and we had some exposure to FTX. Like the custody was there, and it was tough. So I was looking them in the eyes, and they didn't know what the future was going to be. And I made the decision that that was going to be the day that I quit and I went full time, because if we were going to be in the same boat, I wanted to know that I didn't have a different sort of life support system than they did. It was daunting. I asked the people who were working with me, like I said, you can stay if you want, and everyone chose to join, which is a true testament to, I think, their characters. And yeah, it took us a while to spin it out. But it's had the true kind of founder sort of ups and downs and harrowing moments of hanging by the skin of your teeth. And it's been very rewarding to do so, especially with these incredibly talented people. But yeah, that was it.
Awesome. And just to give people a sense of how big this is now, I'm going to reference some DeFi Llama data since I'm the head of growth there. Hundreds of protocols secured. I see we track 250, and then 250 plus, over $7 billion of TVL, $42 billion of perps volume in the past month, and could go on, but I mean, those are pretty huge numbers.
Yeah. Yeah, the network has gotten big, and it's just been like a very singular mission, like get great data on chain, bring it as fast as possible, make it expensive, really try and get the price of everything, and make it available everywhere. And that has resonated with builders. And I can tell you that it's doubled in terms of the number of blockchains and applications that are being used in the last year, and probably doubled again the year before that. So it's certainly helpful to builders and an important piece of infrastructure. And we think that continuing to make things more robust, like unblocking the stuff that isn't within our purview, so that better applications are possible, is really going to be the worthwhile thing that brings in the hundreds of millions and billions of users.
Definitely want to get to that in a second and what's going to bring on the billions of users.
Yeah.
But because we're recording this as part of a intro series, it might be helpful for people. What exactly is an Oracle, and why is that such a critical piece of infrastructure?
Yeah. So like the core fundamental breakthroughs for blockchains is obviously around trust. And so you get to trust a system instead of a singular person. And so like the system has got validators, and at any one point a validator can construct the state of the or of the state. And it works. Everyone kind of is very comfortable with how that works. Now, as soon as you bring in stuff exogenous or outside of this validator network, well, you break the trust. So the idea of an oracle is it's really selling trust, and that's what we do. So we basically export trust of exogenous data. In our case, we focus on financial market data, and we can talk about why that's the case. And we try and do so as close to the time of zero. So we think about it as bringing the trust at T0 everywhere on chain. But that's simplistically, all we're really trying to do is we're preserving trust in a way where people can take that from one blockchain to the next, because they know that, okay, Pyth has done some validation around this. I trust Pyth, and we can also talk about how that gets achieved.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely want to get into that. To put it in maybe like layman's terms, basically you're bringing price data on chain in a way that's trustworthy. Is that one way that people can understand it if they're not a finance person?
Yes, if they're not a finance person, not a blockchain person, that is certainly a way to think about it. We bring price data on chain so that it can be trusted, and we do so with as little latency as possible.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so what sets Pyth apart from other oracles? Because I know you're one of the biggest at this point, but there are competitors.
There are competitors, yeah, and we were not the first. And so G1 DeFi was, in state of the art of DeFi in 2020, was 12-second blocks, and you had Uniswap with a like a very simplistic AMM where there's a whole lot of impermanent loss or loss. And then you had Aave, which is calculating collateral, and they were using Chainlink's Oracle, and that was designed to basically work within these constraints. And so the constraints was 12-second blocks, less than 100 transactions per second, so not super high resolution. And so what they did was they set this egg timer where either the volatility would meet the criteria and a price would get pushed on chain, or a timer would literally tick over like every 24 hours. And it makes a lot of sense when you're doing it that way. If it's like the cost of compute is high, like you don't want to be blasting prices on arbitrarily. Now that comes at sort of a usability cost, because what if the egg timer is set to too wide of a volatility band, and in between that band there's a lot of action that's happening. And likewise, like if it's just not ticking fast enough, then you miss a lot of things. And so those were the hallmarks that we sort of focused on. We wanted to basically solve this problem without having to make those particular sacrifices. And we did it in a couple of ways. So the first one is, go to a much faster blockchain. Now, we obviously had the benefit of having new technologies by being a second mover. And the second mover decision was, let's go build on Solana, 400 millisecond blocks. It's the fastest. And from that hub, we'll be able to then service all the other blockchains so long as their block time is about the same or slower, right? We're at the freshest block for all of those different blockchains. And we'll do this on chain because trust is what we're really selling, and so it needs to be transparent, constructed in a way where everyone can audit it. And we'll basically spam everything to Solana. It was super cheap and super fast at the time, and then we'll have it so you can pull those Oracle updates to the other chains. So now it's almost like everyone has access to this really refined speed, and you only pull in what you use at the latest block time of these slower chains. And so, that was a simplistic way to do it. Now, we actually wanted to solve this not just for crypto data, because that was really the only thing that was being offered on blockchains at the time. We have a very expansive view on what we expect to happen with DeFi globally. We think that there's huge application usage for real world assets and like accessibility around the world. And we think it's going to be transformational, and people are going to look back at this time as like, oh, of course, it's obvious that this would be a killer app. But it needs to be able to service all kinds of real world assets. And so this required us to have a completely different architecture, because not many people realize this, but the world of financial data is a closely guarded world. When people think about data, they think about Google as being the home of everything, right? Organizing the world's information. There's one kind of caveat to that. It doesn't organize financial information. If you walk on the trading floor or into a hedge fund, they don't have Google Finance or Yahoo Finance or TradingView up. They all have Bloomberg. And the reason they have Bloomberg is not because Bloomberg has all the data, it's because it's a conduit for where you can buy this expensive data that is sourced from New York Stock Exchange, CME, NASDAQ, and other large exchanges. Now, these exchanges are generally very wary, or have been very wary, of the idea of DeFi. They're like, we got a great thing going. This doesn't sound like it's going to be great for us. It sounds like a new competitor. We don't want any part of it. So our question was, well, how do you go get the data that they're the ones selling and bring it on the blockchain so that you can go create this app and you don't have to have it strangled by, you know, this supplier? And the innovation was, well, they get their data from somewhere. Who is that? So you just can deconstruct. What is an exchange from first principles? Well, it's a place where people send orders and those orders get a match with one another. And then the orders plus the executions is market data. So it's very simple. So they have been very smart around how they monetize market data. It's gone straight up. It's actually the highest revenue driver over the last few years. And if you were to go around them and you say, all right, well, we're going to get data from the traders who are trading on that, there's going to be ways that they can provide you your data. There's going to be ways that they can't because the exchanges have been so smart in being able to say, hey, we own a lot of this IP, but there'll be some stuff. So in the case of many of the trading firms, it's like their executions. Like you can't send your bids and offers that you send to NASDAQ anywhere, but if you execute a trade, you can publish that. And there's reasons for it. You have to send it to your clearing broker. So this was the idea. It's like, let's go around, let's get data so we don't have to ask these big exchanges to participate, right? We'd love to have them on, but we know that they're too worried and it's too experimental at this point for them to be a part of it. We're gonna go around, we're gonna get this from trading firms. Now, the trading firms, when we started speaking to them, we realized that they've got a different axe to grind. They actually have this huge animosity with a lot of the exchanges where they could be 25 or 50% of the volume of the exchange, but they only have to pay for that data every year. And the data fees seem like they go up every year. And so when we posed this idea to them, they said, yeah, we're in. And we said, well, no, but let me tell you more about the whole thing in DeFi. Like, we don't care. If you're going to tell me that I can monetize my data for the first time and like that puts pricing pressure on like my supplier, I love it. And like, well, it's not necessarily going to put price. We don't care. We're in. We love it. It's a great idea.
Wow.
And so it went incredibly quickly, Patrick. Like it went from first, jump looking at this to jump Virtu GTS. And like, then like we started getting the smaller exchanges like, oh, this is great because, we don't participate in this monopolistic thing. And there's 120 institutions now that have joined the network. And so it's become anti-fragile. There's no single point of failure. And the network is truly designed as like a membership, like where you'll be able to get equitable access to the rewards based on the usage of the contributed data that you have. It's not like you send it into this black box, they get to sell it. It's a little bit more YouTube than it is Instagram, right? Instagram, nobody gets paid anything for it, whereas YouTube, you get paid a bit.
Interesting. Okay, so it went pretty fast in terms of
it went fast.
Yeah. It went fast, which I guess some would say is a sign that there was a demand for that in the market. And then I was going to ask how you solved the chicken and egg problem, but it sounded like you didn't even need to, because
I mean the chicken and the egg. So we basically, any marketplace, the first thing you need to do is stock the shelves, right? If you walk into a store and it's like eggs coming soon, like let us know if you're interested in eggs, put your name. No one's going to do it, right? You need to walk into the grocery store and see this amazing set of things that you can buy. And so the dilemma is always going to be stock the shelves. And the way that Amazon did this is they said, well, we're going to just be a bookstore and we're going to get all the books. And then when they got all the books and everyone said, all right, cool, we understand you sell all the world's books. Then they started selling other stuff. And they didn't start out as the everything store, because as soon as they did, you're going to type in, I need a spatula for my kitchen. And when you go there, it's, they don't have a spatula. This isn't the everything store. This is a niche bookstore. But they categorized it very specifically. So we needed to fill the shelves, and filling the shelves for us was go and get as much data as we possibly can before we start making this available. And so when we got the critical mass of about 10 to 15 providers or publishers, and these are the biggest names. So we had Jane Street, Susquehanna, DRW, Hudson River. They're collectively like over 50% of most of the volume on their expertise, their domain expertise. So like Susquehanna is in options, Jane Street's in ETFs, and so on. And when we were able to amass this, we knew that our ability to source data was unparalleled. We could get anything. If somebody came and said, hey, I want to have shares of Apple, no problem, we can do this tomorrow, because we've got this new source. We don't have to go and say, shoot, how do we get Apple? Now we got to go find a supplier. It's it. We had all the suppliers available. And that's when we started going to market. And we went to market just, focusing on users on Solana. And I think the very first user of Solana is a little protocol named, at the time was named Moe. And then they quickly changed their name to Champagne. It might have been vice versa. I can't remember exactly. And then they changed their name to Drift. And today they're the
Oh, no
largest
kidding.
perps on Solana. Yeah. So Cindy was one of our first during a hackathon in 2021 when Pyth was just in beta. They were the actual first users.
No kidding. I didn't know that that lore.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that pivots nicely to the next question, which is what are some of the products that have been built using
Yeah.
this data today?
Yeah, they fit into two broad categories because that's sort of what defines DeFi today. It's like leverage and trading. And so leverage, like Camino is, largest on Solana. So what they do is they dollarize their collateral using Pyth. And so you obviously you're going to take a loan, everything gets dollarized, and then you determine like the health factor of your loan based on the latest Pyth price. And if you go below that and the certain criteria is met, then some liquidator can come in and take out the position. There's a lot of variations of that and people that create different features, but like broad category number one. Broad category number two is trading, and I'll divide that into two specific types of trading. So one is you execute at the Pyth price. Synthetics allows this. There's a AMM that is on Solana called Lifinity, which allows this as well, which basically Pyth price is ticking every 400 milliseconds. And the protocol will allow you to transfer risk at that price, either with a decentralized group of LPs or against like a single LP or from person to person. So that's kind of category number one in this trading. And category number two is to maintain the basis or the funding rate. And so I'm sure that you and your viewers are very familiar, but like a perpetual market will trade as a derivative of a spot market. And so oftentimes what could happen is your derivative could become out of whack with the spot market. And what you want to have happen is that those two things trade relative to one another. So like, let's just take an example. Like if I'm trading on Bitcoin on the spot market and I have a perpetuals market, the perpetuals market is something that they call parimutuel, right? So it's enclosed, it's zero sum. So I'm playing against the other players within that perpetuals market. So I have to buy against someone. And so the more I buy, the more that price is going to go up. Now, it may go up where it's to the point where it's no longer relative to the actual spot market. Now, you could say, like, okay, there's an arbitrage opportunity. Somebody could come in. But, the reality is, in order for the arbitrage to be realized, you need to have the traders who can take on that basis trade. And like, there are reasons why it's inefficient. Like, for instance, there's no prime brokers. So like, you'd have to have credit with both institutions. Like, it's not super, super easy. So the perpetual markets have figured out, well, we'll just incentivize when this gets out of whack, like we bring in that price, then we're going to have people who are on the side that's overbought. We're going to penalize them every funding rate position, and we're going to reward the people on the side that we want it to go in. So if you have the Bitcoin price is like 5% over the funding rate price or the index price in this case, then you're going to say, all right, anyone who's long gets penalized, and that penalty goes to the people who are short because we're trying to bring this back in line. So the longs would say, oh, I should close my position now so I don't get penalized. And the people are saying, okay, I can pile in, I can just earn from being in this short trade, I can earn this basis. And it's much more efficient. So we provide the funding rate basis for all those protocols.
Wow. Okay. So next question is, what are some future applications that could be built? You mentioned bringing hundreds of millions, billions of people on chain in the
Yeah.
future.
Yeah, so my very basic dream scenario of DeFi is that we have a global Robinhood app that everyone has access to. And like as soon as you put yourself in that position, it seems very obvious because you can think of like, okay, fine, we all have Netflix, we all have Spotify. And like when you're in these markets like the US, it seems okay, we don't really need that. And everything is pretty good now. I have Robinhood. But when you think about like places in like the developing world, you don't have access to a lot of these markets. And so that's really to me the killer app. It's like going and creating this Spotify-ish product that is effectively a Robinhood that's as good as Robinhood on all of the things that it does. It needs to be as fast. It needs to be as slick, as an intuitive. The UX has to be great. And then it has to have some elements of it that are the things that, are kind of bonuses to people, like has some sort of decentralization. It has the ability to like switch your account or leave if you don't like it, like low switching costs, and go take something else. Like those are big attributes to crypto to me. And I think that's going to be like the killer application, and they're going to have access to everything. And I think what happens is when we get to this point where there's this global Robinhood app that everyone's trading on, and they don't think about it as blockchain or DeFi, they think about it as finance. Like, oh, okay, it's the Dynamo app. And I have the Dynamo. I can't believe life existed before the Dynamo app. Then I think we start to get into these hundreds of millions of users on chain. And at that point, I think it starts to get really interesting, because now we're into like the days of takeoff, where like Facebook was outsourcing status. And then it became, well, we're going to take a view on status and we're going to make it so that it's, just an image and it's available for a certain amount of time, like Snapchat, or we're just going to be stories, or we're going to just be text and we're going to limit the amount of characters. I think that's where we get into the really exciting part. So you have this, this killer Robinhood app that everyone knows about. And then we've got every month, you've got 10 million new users coming in. And then you're going to get these competitors that are doing stuff that is highly unusual for what we're familiar with. But the reason they're able to pull it off is because there's this framework now that allows you to get this thing, and everyone's familiar with it, to be able to, do all this trading or get access to all these different asset classes around the world. And it's going to be wild innovations. Like trade follow is something that's been around for ages. It's just never really taken off. We have it today in like the form of vaults, in asset management a little bit, but it's just never taken off. And it's kind of like, I think about that as, the iPad wasn't the first tablet. Like they've been around for 10 years, but they're used by UPS drivers to get you to sign like your name. You need the right infrastructure and the right form factor in order for people to really appreciate it. And I think that's one of those ones we're really going to see, like the socialization of trading. And I think that's a worthwhile mission. I don't think we need to then also tokenize like real estate and like, make that stuff all happen. That'd be great. I'd be very excited for that to happen. But I think this is going to be great. One thing that I think would be so amazing is if you can make this so intuitive, like, and so part of the literacy of people's financial education, where you're getting your paycheck and you decide how much of your paycheck you want in various things. Like, okay, I need a bit of cash up front, so I'm going to take 20% of my cash for the first week, and then the other 80% of that, I want you to put 40% of it into NVIDIA stock, 20% into Bitcoin. You can carve this out, because right now the actual process of doing that is filled with so much friction. It's like you have to get in your bank account, send it to your Schwab or your Robinhood account, and then you divide it out, and then you got to send it back. You got to think about taxes. That could all be taken care of and taken into account, and like it will just be a much better UX for everyone. And not only about like the actual movement of things, it's just a better experience for people to be able to control their financial freedom.
100%. And then add in streaming payments, composability, all the other things you can do with DeFi. And no, I agree.
Patrick,
that's a worthwhile vision.
The thing is, like, it's actually the infrastructure is the enabler. So like, okay, to go back to like the 90s, like you had Amazon and, dial-up modem, and you basically would like, try and tell people like, you have constant connectivity, the supply is updated, there's less clicks to be able to, you don't have to be on the phone to order it. There's like, you just get to click through. And every single person who's ever seen it, with the exception of a few dorks, says, I don't get it. It's never gonna work. I got the Sears catalog, comes right away, get off my phone line. And then 10 years later, when it's a little bit faster because you have broadband lines, you show them again, and you're like, I kind of get it. Same thing, right? Nothing's changed. And then 10 years later, when you've got it on the mobile app and you're able to show people on, say, like Mr. Porter, like, a model dancing around showing what the clothes look like in real time, like, oh, I fully get it. Yeah, why would I ever use a catalog? It's all that infrastructure is like actually the unlocker. And so this is what we think about every single day, is like, how do we bring a more expansive catalog of symbols on chain so that people can build those apps? How do we decompress the processing times, reduce all of the latency possible so that it can be as real time and as harmonized with the whole world of prices? Because it doesn't matter if you create this application that is like in a silo in Nigeria, that's totally fine. As long as you're using the Pyth price, you're getting great execution. So that's our mission, is we think that the global pricing layer, so long as everyone's tapped into this and we're getting all the data from the right sources, we're getting it from all those different applications where there's execution and it's feeding back into this global price. Well, that's going to create the ability to have tons of different executions and settlement layers. You can have settlement silos that are fully regulated and specific to a certain jurisdiction, as long as it's being brought back into the price. And we think that it's the greatest enabler of the entire world of DeFi is to have this price correct.
So here, Pyth is the infrastructure that's gonna.
That's right.
Pyth is the infrastructure. Now, one perspective is also that the infrastructure was important for internet to take off. Arguably, mobile was critical too. Where if you look at the percent of the people that were using internet regularly, it didn't fully take off until iPhone. Do you have any perspective on what might be the platform that makes that DeFi or crypto vision mainstream?
Yeah, right now it's, in my mind, it's mobile, because I'm not smart enough to think about what the next form factor will be after mobile. but for sure it's mobile. Right now it's all desktop. Like that seems super like clunky to me. When I'm doing things on DeFi, I'm mostly using mobile and Phantom, unless I want to do something that is not offered there. But like for simple stuff on the run, I use it. I think that that's the future. I think mobile will most certainly be the way that the majority of the world interacts. And then, as I said, like, whatever tomorrow's form factor is, because, we don't need an operating system, you can have a chatbot do it all for you. Like, sure, it's probably that. But
Yeah, I guess
that's going to change everything anyway.
Yeah, if we could predict that perfectly, then we'd be doing very well. Awesome. No, I like that vision a lot, and you actually answered a lot of other questions that I had. One thing I wanted to touch on was recently, when we're recording this, Pith released Pith Laser.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So do you want to talk about that and kind of the implications of that?
Yeah. So we launched Pith in 2021 on Solana, state of the art, fastest blockchain out there, 400 milliseconds. The home of on-chain order books, the home for perpetuals, dexes. Became up for a while a home for like massive NFT launches, like high volume NFT launches, let's call it. Eventually became the home for meme coin launch pads. Obviously been the home for DPIN for a while as well. So, we weren't alone in saying that, okay, high availability, high compute space, and low gas fees are like valuable for our specific thing. It's obviously valuable for other stuff. Now we're in 2025, and like 400 milliseconds is not the final boss. It's good enough for most things, and so we've seen stuff like Hyperliquid where they make sacrifices to decentralization in exchange for performance. And the assumption was no one's ever going to trade there, and those critics were wrong, and people are trading there and loving it and happy to deal with some of the consequences of trade-offs in favor of performance. So we needed to have a suitable upgrade to Pith in order to be able to provide the best UX for protocols like Hyperliquid that wanted to kind of compete in this like hyper performant space. And that's where Pith Laser came in. So Pith Laser is done with some trade-offs against security, in terms of doesn't use 120 validators and prices for the aggregate. It's not done fully on this public PythNet blockchain, but it makes them in favor of performance. So we have a subset of publishers or data providers that are providing prices, and those prices are now available at 1 millisecond intervals. And it's also able to scale much faster than some of the constraints that we had by doing this on PythNet. So PythNet, as a quick background, is a fork of Solana. What happened is Solana got way more popular than we were anticipating. We were about 50% of the block space, and we realized, oh, it's not affordable to be here anymore. So we need to move over to our own chain.
All right. Final question today is, if you were not working on Pith, what would you be working on in DeFi?
In DeFi, that's a good question. So I think it depends on like the time frame. So I had that big vision, and I consider it to be my life's work to make that happen. So if it wasn't Pith, it would be trying to first get the infrastructure to a point where it can work. So like either building a faster blockchain or contributing to a faster blockchain, or basically compressing times down on existing blockchains. And then if that hurdle is out of the way, then it would probably be on working on the distribution of this sort of global Robinhood app. And if that's already done, then it would be trying to innovate on what are the cool features that haven't been tried out before. I think that that's the sequential order for all of these things to happen, and I want to be around for all of it.
Awesome. Well said. Thanks so much for joining us today, Mike. If people want to learn more about you or Pith, where can they find you?
You can find me on Twitter or X, Dom Cahill, MDOMCHILL, and Pyth Network. Thanks so much for having me on, Patrick. It was great.
Thanks for having. Great to have you.